This is the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon. What's up, Menopod? I hope everyone's staying safe with the current wave of COVID. Canceling travel plans has been so hard. My brother wanted to come visit us in Provincetown, but since he had to be on a plane for 6 hours to travel from Seattle to Boston, he decided against it. It's so hard right now trying to crack the whole Corona thing, but we will. We're resilient, and since we're also social, we have to figure it out. I put my faith in the science behind it. In my lifetime, I've seen the end to polio, smallpox, and HIV as a death sentence thanks to science. Remember, when it comes to menopause in life, the only constant is change. And change is possible, but it won't happen overnight, just like the vaccines didn't happen overnight, right? The first step to change is making the decision to change. And then we have to back that up with action. And that's the big challenge. How do we take any action? And even more importantly, what actions are we going to take? The Menopause Movement is here to help you with all of that. Menopause can be a time of misery, or it can be a time of unapologetic action toward creating a life we love. I woke up in the middle of my menopausal journey, hating myself, my body, and the life I had created. I didn't know what to do, so I went on a quest to find out how to make change happen. The result was the Menopause Movement and this podcast. The Menopause Movement has one purpose: to help end the suffering caused by menopause through transformational education and coaching. We want to help you too. So head on over to menopausemovement.com, take the quiz there. And not only will you discover your type, but we'll also tailor some offerings to help you take back your life from menopause. Getting into the driver's seat of my life was the first step I took to overcome the changes I experienced with menopause. But I did it alone, and it was lonely. The Menopause Movement has created a community of women who are unapologetically deciding to become their best selves, one small action at a time, and they are kick-ass, let me tell you. You can too. Join our community and start to create a life you love. So today we're talking to Jeanne Chung, founder and CEO of Mighty. Jeanne combined her unique professional background with the passion to transform the status quo around women, aging, and menopause. She's part analytical nerd with an engineering degree from University of Michigan and an MBA from MIT, which led her to management consulting and tech investment banking. She is part hippie wellness entrepreneur, having practiced yoga and taught over 2 decades, owned and operated a chain of yoga studios that served nearly 1 million students, built and led a global yoga teacher training company that trained hundreds of yoga teachers from around the world, and opened and owned a boutique wellness hotel at the forefront of detox and fasting. Her own personal experience with perimenopause was such utter crap, she decided to design her own supplement and develop Mighty. And since the beginning, her vision extended beyond menopause, because helping women through the menopause transition is more than just modernizing menopause. It's about getting women through menopause so they can be radiant and vital as they age. That means hashtag badass at 80. During the podcast, we discuss Jeanne's big career pivot to purpose after the dot-com bubble burst, Jeanne's experience with menopause, dismissive doctors, the supplement that helped her the most, and how she was inspired to design something that works, the app her customers use to track symptoms, and the effects of supplements, the Mighty supplement, the whole line, the importance of research, and the fact that change takes time even when we're taking a pill. Now check out the supplement line at menopausemovement.com/mighty, where you can buy the supplement and support Menopause Movement all at once. At the end of the episode, visit menopausemovement.com, where you can find the show notes plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a written review, like and subscribe on YouTube, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. Let me know who we should have on the podcast next. What can we do to make it better? Send me an email at drgordon@menopausemovement.com or a DM on Instagram or Facebook at drmichellegordon.com, MICHELLEGORDON. Thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. Super, super stoked to have Jeanne on the show today. Bye. Jeanne Chung, of Mighty Menopause. Welcome to the Menopause Movement Podcast. And I would like to know from you, I've got my papers here, I'm looking at your outline. Tell me the origin story. So you started Mighty Menopause because you had a difficult menopause, perimenopause especially, right?
Yeah.
And before that, what were you doing?
Yeah, so before that, it's a very non-normative career. I started out, I have an engineering undergrad. I went to MIT for an MBA, so very analytical, if you will. Was a management consultant, was a tech investment banker during the first internet boom. Super exciting work. And then the internet...
In the early 2000s?
In the early 2000s.
1999, 1998,
exactly.
All the way till 2001, and then...
Boom. And you know what? I'll tell everyone if they don't know it already, one of the worst jobs to have when the market is crashed is an investment banker. A pretty obvious statement. And then I quit and became a yoga teacher. And this was a major pivot in my life that opened up this whole area for me.
I'm so sorry, but I just got to get this. You went from being an investment banker to looking for a purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, totally. I think that's so huge. So you're like, oh geez, dang it, I got to find out who I am. I'm going to do yoga.
Well, yeah, what happened was that dynamic actually didn't get uncovered for a while. And I'll tell you the story here. So I started driving to work downtown San Francisco. I passed by this little yoga studio and everyone would be standing outside and the windows are steamy. It turns out it's a Bikram studio. And I was like, so scary, what's going on there? And then I went there and I couldn't believe how amazing I felt afterward. And I said, I got to keep going. And I kept going. And I noticed after a couple months, I'd kicked sugar. After a couple months, I was just kind of eating better, sleeping better. I was training for a marathon and my knees were killing me. And after a couple weeks, no knee pain. I was walking up and down my stairs in the house. And I was thinking wait, something changed. What's going on here? And I was like, screw it, I'm done. I'm done with marathons. I'm all in for yoga. And it took me a while to understand that dynamic of how it changes who you are, how you feel in your body, the decisions that you're making. And it just kind of took off inside me. I dig it. I dug it. I became a teacher. It was just my thing, my jam for a long time.
I mean, I think yoga is really interesting because there's a lot of different types of yoga, right? And the yoga that we know is the kind where you move your body and you kind of try and figure out how to connect your mind and your body and get them in alignment. And then there's the kind that comes from India that is just breath work that gets you in touch with your subconscious mind and your imagination and whatever you want to call God. And that's very different. That's very, very different from
where we're focused physically here in the US. What I love about it, I've always positioned, not always, being in hot yoga, becoming a hot yoga teacher. I built a yoga teacher training program that trained hundreds of people from around the world to become yoga teachers. That it's kind of I call it sneaky yoga. So when you see it, it's like a workout. But what's really happening is the first level of mastery of the body, mastery of the breath. And then you start to get into this world, whether you like it or not, whether you wanted it or not, in the space what's happening in my mind? You get to that level. And that's why I really dig hot yoga, because it's so sneaky. It's actually the catalyst for some yoga, but comes in just kind of a very American, push hard packaging.
I love that. And, it's so funny because we have this opportunity in menopause, especially, to really re-examine everything that we, all the choices we made up until this point. And, I don't know if it's the chemistry. I mean, I don't have the data, right? But if it's the changes of the brain because of loss of estrogen, that leads to brain fog and all sorts of other things, sleep disturbance that leads to brain fog. But I just think there's such an opportunity for re-examination because menopause is a time where we start to really examine who we are. And not everyone. Some people go through menopause and it's nothing. But for me, it was just I woke up in the middle of my menopause what kind of life did I create? I'm not happy. I don't love this. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And I was making a lot of money. And I was like, this isn't the life I want. I need to do something different. And I had to reinvent myself.
Yeah. And it's scary and exciting. And I think we have to keep reminding us that it's exciting also. Maybe more than scary. And have you heard of the happiness curve, the U curve?
That's the guy from Harvard, right?
Yeah. And he mapped it out. And basically the bottom of your happiness is around 47, which pretty much ties with perimenopause, right? The kickoff of perimenopause. So all of it culminates. And I think that's the challenge of women as we go through menopause. We cannot extract aging. We cannot extract the happiness, the bottom of the happiness curve from the whole experience, because it's all mushed together. And it takes a lot of commitment and awareness to say, like, even the basic things like, how were my periods before? And then how are they now in perimenopause? And like, I can't remember. And why is that? It's because no one took me seriously. So I didn't take myself seriously. I was too busy raising kids, like so many reasons. But it forces us to say, okay, where are we now? Where have we been? And then where are we going to go?
Yeah. And I think with menopause, it's such a great opportunity for us to say, well, not only are we forced to maybe examine mortality in a different way because our parents are aging and we have to, deal with, if our parents have lived that long, deal with the mortality on that. But then our own mortality as our children have grown up and maybe have left the nest. And it's like, what am I doing now? Right.
Like, who am I?
So, yeah, exactly. Who am I? And so we have this existential crisis, a lot of us. And that's where that's what the menopause movement is there for, to kind of help you figure out who you are again. Yeah. So with you, so let me hear about your perimenopause, how your own personal experience with perimenopause was such utter crap. So
those are the two most straightforward words I could use. I was 47 and just like right on the kind of average timing, and I started to have some really strange pain. And the way I start to lead this up by saying, for adult women who've been menstruating, we know the difference, right? Upper abdominal pain, lower abdominal pain, UTI, menstrual cramps, even like a vaginal infection, ovulation pain. Like we all know the difference. Like we're like, okay, this is not cramps. This is something else. It turns out just my vulva, were just sore. The whole thing was sore, increasingly sore. It's hard to sit. And it's very peculiar because doesn't really happen that much and no one ever talks about it. And so I said, okay, this is enough to go to the doctor. So I went to a new gynecologist and it just was like such a friggin' joke. Like it was so bad. I have this thing, and I described it and I said, I think I'm, coming up to menopause. I'd like to take a test. The gyne was like, you don't need a test. The test's not going to tell you anything. And I agree, like a one-off test doesn't tell you much. So I agree with that. But I said, look, I'd done 2 rounds of IVF in the past 5 years. So I said, I have test level data and I'd like to make a comparison. And I like to think I'm a fairly articulate person making my case, and got completely dismissed.
Oh, dismissed by a doctor? No.
Yeah, what a surprise.
Really?
Yeah. And
surprise.
So such a surprise.
But you know what? I'm a doctor, and part of my thing was my friends said, oh yeah, you just got to suffer through it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. There's no reason why we should have to suffer through anything. Yeah. So, and that helped bring on the menopause movement. But on top of that, there's this whole, misogyny, especially in America, and shame around female issues because of the way that, the patriarchy, and, we talk about that almost every podcast. Yep. And then on top of that, there's this lack of education. Lack of research, lack of education. Yeah. And so it's like, well, why do I have to suffer? And it's true. I mean, they're not gonna check your blood because you have to have, multiple tests, and the FSH has to be high in more than one test. And even then it's like, that may or may not tell you anything. And so perimenopause is hard to diagnose. It's really, diagnosis of exclusion more than anything else.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I understood the point, but I was like, I would like to make a comparison.
Sure.
And it didn't happen. And so I was like, okay, fine. I leave and I'm feeling just disappointed. And this is the utter crap part. So the symptoms got worse, right? I couldn't concentrate. Like my vulva just hurt so much. And so I sent an email and I described it and I said, here's the deal. I need some support. It's getting worse. The email that came back basically said, 1, all women are different. 2, you're just going to have to suffer. 3, we don't have anything for you unless you want pain meds.
Wow. So basically, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Right.
But you're on your own.
Yeah. Or have some opioids, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I can imagine that a little bit of testosterone cream probably would have fixed you.
Or progesterone, as I understand it. And that led me to kind of the path towards Mighty, but something would have fixed me. And I think the other, in addition to the patriarchy, that it's, most gynaes are also OBs, and there's not a lot of incentive, right, to deal with a woman in kind of like an incremental symptom on a long arc where there's not a lot of understanding how they would make money by spending the time.
Well, it's hard to say. I know plenty of gynecologists who have given up OB because of the risk or the cost, and they like the primary care aspect of it. And gynecologists are considered primary care, at least, in America. I mean, I don't love our healthcare system, and I'm out of it because of the way that insurance companies, have turned everything into profit, and corporations have taken over medicine. The relationship between the doctor and the patient is really over now. It's too bad. And that's just the way it is. But all right. So let's go back to your vulvar pain. You had vulva pain, and then you got dismissed. So what happened next?
So what happened is when I got that message, it was just a very bright line. Right? There's no help for me here. I'm going to have to figure this out myself. So it's a good DIY, roll up my sleeves, like a woman getting shit done. Just started to research. And I said, okay, what is available for me? And this was 4 or 5 years ago, and not a lot of talk on menopause on the internet. So I'm digging through forums and random websites and trying to find plant-based remedies. And I came across a bunch of different sources that pointed to the same thing, which is chasteberry or Vitex agnes. And I started using it. And I had relieved my symptoms within 2 weeks.
Wow.
But I took it in a way that was very deliberate. So I have an opinion about supplements. And so if you take a bunch of supplements and they're meant to go into your blood, and you've just eaten 3 pieces of pizza, it's going to be really hard for that to get through the stomach, through to the liver, for it to get into your blood.
Sure.
So I took chasteberry as a tincture, and I took it always on an empty stomach before I went to bed, because I wanted to get the chasteberry in.
Yeah.
And I think the delivery was really important. And the takeaway is that chasteberry really helped. And as I understand chasteberry and the research that I've come across is that it stimulates LH production out of the pituitary, which then in turn will stimulate progesterone. So it doesn't stimulate progesterone, it doesn't mimic progesterone, but it stimulates production, which I thought was one, pretty cool. And two, understandable, mapping it to my result.
Well, it has to, in order for progesterone to be made, it has to do something in the pulsing. Because one of the reasons why we go into menopause is because the LH and FSH are consistently high. And when those don't pulse, then we stop cycling, right? When they stay high, we stop cycling. And so I don't understand the mechanism of action. And I actually am not a huge proponent of any pill, powder, potion, or patch, because menopause is a natural rebalancing of our hormones. That's part of it. The reason why I think our menopause is so hard in the Western world is because of the external influences from our diet more than anything else.
Yes. I
agree. So when you're saying, pizza, your body's going to work really hard to metabolize all that vegetable oil and cheese and, cheese proteins and stuff to get stuff in, through. And then on top of that, taking the supplement. So when it comes to taking a supplement, I think you made a really good point that you took it very intentionally. And I think what happens is that a lot of people will say, well, let me try this, let me try this, let me try this. And then they don't, because we're taught in school, how to do an experiment, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But oftentimes we don't follow those rules. And so instead of changing just one thing and then keeping track, because it takes a couple of weeks when you're taking something orally to see a change, instead of doing that, what we'll do is we will just say, well, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this. And then before you know it, you're taking a handful of pills twice a day and you still don't feel any better and you don't know which one's working.
Right. Yep. And it can be frustrating for people. I've done the same thing. And, I look at it from the choice that we make, how hard it is to track, what am I really dealing with? Am I dealing with anxiety? Am I dealing with heavy bleeding? Am I dealing with sleeplessness? What's the thing that I want to address? How am I doing it? And layering a whole thing of management around it. So when do I take it? How do I feel? Okay, let's do the experiment for a month. And we're so busy and easily distracted that it's hard to execute for sure.
Yeah, I think it's so important that we do these things with intention. And that's why you have your app, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's hear about this app that you have. What's it called?
Yeah, so it's called the Wellness Data Service. It's not the most brilliant name, but essentially it is a daily reminder. It is a weekly symptom check-in. At the end of every month, we generate a trend line chart and send it to you. So the idea was specifically around what we're just talking about. We're having a problem. We make a decision for some change. and we're in the moment, we're going to start. What do we need around it to make sure we're a success at the end? So I've created this thing for women so they can, it's all via text message. So there's no separate app yet, but right now it's by text message. And so a woman says like, you know what, I work out at 7, I'm out of the shower by 7:45. Before I eat breakfast at 8:17, I'd like a message at 8:12. And so we can send a message at 8:12. And it's like, hey, Dr. Gordon, like time to take your supplement. And then if you give us a thumbs up or the letter Y, we can track at the end of the month. So we can say, hey, your hit rate was 20 out of 30. So therefore you can kind of conclude that you did the best you could from intake, and then you can look at the results. But if it said like, hey, you only did 14 out of 30, like we're going to have to try again.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the that's the daily reminder. And then what we have is you can track 2 symptoms and you can call it anything you want. So you can call it sleeplessness, bad mood, like ragey lady, like whatever the tag is. We capture it and we send
Alien.
Yeah, exactly. Alien life form. And then we'll use your language and say like, hey, Jeanne, last week for sleeplessness, last week in alien life form, you were a 7. How are you this week? And you take a moment and you give us a number. And then we'll just give you a chart. So you can then, at the end of the month, every bottle is 30 days worth. At the end of the month, you can have, okay, the empty bottle, how you feel, and then actually a picture of how you've told us you felt, and you can just use that information to make another decision.
So I think that's so good. And the reason why I say that is because as a behavior change expert, we spend a lot of time inside of the menopause movement helping women reach their goals. And the way we do that is through deliberate tracking of what we're going to do. You know, we start out, women join us for a year and I say, okay, what are we going to get done this year? And how are we going to measure it? And what are we going to do? And so, and then we have inside of our monthly content, it's like, here's some things to make your life better. We talk about wellness, we talk about appreciation and gratitude. And then we go into let's change your behavior. And we talk about how to track, like the best ways to keep track of your behavior change. This is something like let's say you want to quit smoking and you need to like keep track of your cravings, right? You can take a penny from one thing to another, or a bead or something. So there's a lot of ways to track your behavior. And so for what you're doing, I think that's really great to, especially when it comes to behavior, to say, hey, did you do it? Did you follow through? Did you do what you said you were going to do? And that comes back to personal integrity as well. Yeah. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of behavior change, because the choice to do something about symptom relief, right, is then a new behavior, right?
Yeah.
A new daily behavior to take a supplement or to exercise or do like 5 minutes of weight training, whatever it is, like that's a commitment. And how can Mighty help support that in a way? One of my users has said to me, like, what I love about, she's raising 2 girls. And she said, what I love about it is like, I get a message and it's like, someone's caring about me. Like I care about everyone else in this house, but it just feels like someone is caring about me and it feels really good. And the experience really expands.
Yeah, so that's really important because one of the we've surveyed over 50,000 women in menopause here at the Menopause Movement. So we have a good idea. Yeah, we have a good idea of how menopause affects women. And in the internal struggle, one of the biggest ones is I feel lost and lonely. I don't have anyone to talk to. I feel like I'm the only one. And, you can only, the podcast is great and we can only raise so much awareness. What we're trying to do is build a community so that people have the ability to support each other. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you're listening to this and you're feeling lost and lonely, you don't have to, because that's why we're here.
Yeah,
right?
We're here for you.
Yeah, we're definitely here for you. All right. Let's talk about your supplement, the Mighty Formula.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how you came across that and what you wanted it to do and how you tested it.
Yeah, sure. So I'll tell you the history. So one was chasteberry, my experience with chasteberry, and then coupling that with research that I could find that supported its mechanism to the best that it can, because the research is scant. It's not entirely super robust. But to me, it matched with kind of traditional usage of the plant with modern like herbalists and botanists, how they look at it and where they use it, as well as the research that was available on it. And my personal experience, I said, okay, I think this is a winner. Then my other symptom happened, which was I was having really heavy bleeding. And my first heavy bleed was like almost 3 weeks. which is a lot. Like we all
That's
can
a long
appreciate
time.
how bad it is. And then I'd come to understand, right? And it's funny that I didn't know this before or knew it like, at top of mind, is estrogen builds endometrial lining. And so one could then logically conclude there's a lot of estrogen in my body to make me bleed for 3 weeks. And we know that progesterone wanes. So the estrogen effect is so much more because you don't have progesterone to balance it out. So I was like, okay, a lot of estrogen. Then I came across DIM, which I think it's diindolyl methane, which is the phytochemical in cauliflower, cruciferous vegetables, cauliflower, broccoli. And it is known to metabolize estrogen. So I was speaking to a functional medicine doctor and said, oh, we use DIM because it metabolizes estrogen. I said, okay. That's one point of proof. Then I started researching DIM, and this is a great story to share because it also points to the patriarchy. Yeah. So DIM was popularized by male bodybuilders in the 70s or 80s because they're trying to maximize effects of testosterone by getting rid of any endogenous estrogen. So they were taking DIM. They found it, they took DIM. And then all this research magically happens, right? So there's actually a fair amount of research around DIM and its efficacy for
on men.
DIM on estrogen. I don't know if the subjects were, the impetus was around male bodybuilders. Yeah. The studies, this is a good question. I'm not sure if there are men or women, but it shows, they might've been just on mice, but it shows. Mice doesn't really
like translate to the human metabolism in the same way.
But can it be an indicator?
It can be, but I mean, it's a completely different species. I know we got to test some things, but it's, until we get to double-blind placebo-controlled trials, it's really hard to know what the truth is.
Right. Yes.
For humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, all right. So anyway, so let's hear about the mice studies.
The research that I've seen shows that DIM does metabolize estrogen. It also creates the positive estrogen metabolites. And so, I was like, okay, this is good. And then I also used DIM when I was having my heavy periods and mitigated them. Right. And then I had some other, like another crazy long period. And I was like, okay, so I'm down with DIM and I'm down with chasteberry to manage these. The design of the formula was understanding what is available in the market. And I can appreciate that in the market in the US, it's unregulated, things are inconsistent, it's kind of all over the board. Are you getting extract? Are you getting just the plant? It's kind of a mess. But I took it as a lead as kind of the normative dosing amount and what they're looking for in percentage or ratio of active ingredient. And so I took those from those two different ingredients and used those as the primary ingredients because I wanted to address the kind of the root causes underneath the common symptoms of early perimenopause, which are heavy bleeding, high anxiety, kickoff of night sweats, right? Yeah. And heavy bleeding and kickoff of night sweats and anxiety are the big ones.
Right. Yeah. Anxiety gets really amped up in menopause and perimenopause. It's really crazy.
Yeah. Have you seen the study? This is where I've gone with, it's not even a study. I think it's well known that estrogen, the drop in estrogen creates anxiety feelings.
I haven't seen that study, but it's not surprising to me. I mean, the estrogen's effects on the brain are so profound that, we're used to having so much estrogen and then, it kind of wanes. Mm-hmm. And and for some women, it's not like a mild, like slow decline. It's like, boom, it's gone. Mm-hmm. And that's weird. And the brain has to readjust.
Right.
And the one thing I want to say here is that if we did orchiectomies, which is removing of the testicles, as readily as we did hysterectomies, full hysterectomies, there would be, if you, men who get their testicles removed are men who either have advanced prostate cancer or testicular cancer, right? Women who get their ovaries and their uteruses removed are women who have some symptoms that can probably be treated. And it's just like, let's just go remove this because it's internal, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly. I can't believe you said that. This is my, I have very strong opinions. I think we have the similar ones. It's the attitude like, well, I don't see it. You don't need it. Let's just take it out. And it's barbaric.
Listen, if we told men that we had to take their balls off, they would be like, what?
God, I know. Oh my God. Yes, completely agree. It is outrageous, the rate at which we do hysterectomies. And I was remarking that I talked to a lot of women my age, I'm 53, And they're saying like, I asked my mom and she can't tell me because she had a hysterectomy. And it was so frequent. And it's something like 30% higher, like the number of hysterectomies in the US versus Europe.
It's ridiculous, I have to say. And I'm a surgeon, right? And I've done hysterectomies and with the OBGYNs. And it's just really ridiculous. The whole thing. And the fact that we go to that more than anything else. And so if you're listening to this and you don't have a cancer, confirm, because obviously cancer, you got to cut it out. But if it's not a cancer and they're just saying, you need a hysterectomy, I think, a second or third or fourth opinion might be in order because there are things you can do. And like my mom had a hysterectomy when she was in her 30s because she couldn't stop bleeding. And, your supplement may have helped her. So. Yeah.
And the more we know, the more data we have, the more insight we have around endocrinology, like what happens over time, what happens really over the population of women during reproductive years and perimenopause and later postmenopause. And we could really understand, right? Like how your mom compares to the norm. How are you going
to get funding for a study like that?
Oh my God, right? I'm working on it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the problem is that women are second-class citizens, or they have been. Now, we're not so much anymore. We're starting to speak up. Back 5 years ago, it was hard to find anybody talking about menopause. Now there's so many of us talking about menopause. But the information in Dr. Google is still very, very disjointed and weird. And that's why, that was actually the main reason why I started the menopause movement, because I was like, hey, I have menopause. What the hell? Maybe I can find a course. Somebody can show me what's going on. And I couldn't find one. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to create one. There's a need. And that's how I got started. But in terms of, getting a study funded, I mean, you'd need to, it'd have to be almost as big as, the studies that were done in the early 2000s about, estrogen and progesterone. And I mean, you'd want a really, really big study like that.
Right. A big study, long-term, right? Because you want to see what happens over time. And that's a big pitch. I think there are ways to kind of start like chipping away at lack of data problem. And that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, well, maybe you can, go back to Boston and get, Harvard or get Mass Health to sponsor a study.
Yeah, totally. I'm making some connections. I'll keep you posted.
Right on. I'm glad I don't have to worry about research.
That is no joke, that research thing. But the data is really important. I look at a lot of women's health, actually maybe the entirety of women's health, outside of very acute, extreme situations like cancer, is a lot of conjecture. So it's like try the HRT, see how you go. You're 17, you're having problems with your periods, so just take the birth control, see how you go. And it's a very blunt instrument for a very sophisticated situation. And I'm not a fan.
Yeah. So inside of in your formula, you have some milk thistle. And I think that's so important because milk thistle is proven to support the liver. And helps to detoxify the liver. And actually, IV milk thistle is the remedy for the death cap mushroom. It is not authorized in the US, but it's used in Europe because that's the remedy and it works.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's a lot of strong research around milk thistle. That it can reverse cirrhotic liver cells. Like, it's really amazing. Yeah,
I used to take it, but I don't do anything that damages my liver anymore. So
there's no need. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while I have a drink, but it's really, really rare. And I think that, one thing that is so prevalent in our diets that is damaging to the liver and would be a reason for any woman to take milk thistle is high fructose corn syrup. And because it's metabolized in the liver just like alcohol. And so if you're drinking a lot of soda or you're drinking a lot of Gatorade or things that you think are healthy, they have these non-healthy sugars in them made from corn, the byproduct of the corn industry. And remember, the government doesn't care about your health, even though you think it does. Corporations don't care about your health. All they care about is profit. And the high fructose corn syrup they found out was, oh, hey, really, really great. We got corn. We can turn it into something sweet and without any care about how it's metabolized. And so it's really important, I think, for us to support ourselves by either, not buying those products. That's one way we can vote with our wallets. But, I don't have a big enough platform to really affect, the soda pop industry. But we can still do that and, insist on cane sugar. Or the better thing is to, not drink it at all and also support your liver with a little bit of milk thistle or with this mighty supplement. So how does this bioperine help the bioavailability?
I love the story about bioperine. The other thing I like about milk thistle and bioperine is that there's kind of the historic usage, traditional medicine, and then how science and research now supports it. So milk thistle was a traditional plant remedy, and now we have really strong research that shows that it is in fact effective. Same with bioperine. So bioperine is a phytochemical that takes the active green out of black pepper. And black pepper from Ayurveda says like it does enhance like whatever you're eating for it to be the nutrients to get to your body. And there's strong research around bioperine as well.
Well, so is there a reason why you don't have turmeric in your supplement?
You have bioperine? I look at turmeric. I understand turmeric as an anti-inflammatory and also kind of helps digestion a little bit. I didn't design this for kind of overall support and balance that you would for other things like a B12 complex or magnesium, calcium support. This is really designed specifically for the hormonal profile that is causing those key symptoms, the common symptoms in early perimenopause.
Fantastic. It's really important to know exactly what you're after, and to I mean, we have a business saying that the riches are in the niches, right? But on top of that, I mean, you're focusing on one thing, perimenopause symptoms, let's make them better. So I think that's awesome. And with this supplement, somebody in perimenopause, so somebody in their late 30s, early 40s who's starting to, maybe have irregular periods or just starting to notice that they're like all over the place mood-wise, and that's without symptoms, without maybe hot flashes or weight gain or anything, just like the moodiness and the menopausal alien. How long after they start taking it will they start to see some results?
I have feedback from my customers anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. And it would depend also if heavy bleeding is one of the symptoms we're trying to address, then when you start it would impact that. So if let's say you're starting it as your endometrial lining is being built, it will mitigate. But if you're starting it like post-cycle and the endometrial lining has already been built, it's going to take a while for it to impact it. I have a couple women who have come back and said that within a few days, and this is, this is aberrational. I understand that the nature of it takes a while, but within a few days her hot flashes reduced. Within a week, she was sleeping again. Another woman was just sleeping. She hadn't slept through the night in a couple of years. And I know it sounds really snake oily, and I want to emphasize that I'm not saying like this is going to happen to you, but what I point to in the feedback is that there is a mechanism that's happening. There's something in the supplement. For example, I look at the woman who couldn't sleep for 2 years through the night as an indication where we know that progesterone metabolizes into melatonin. So when progesterone is low, your endogenous melatonin is really low, you're not sleeping through the night, etc. And when she started using chasteberry to boost progesterone production, that she started to have, I'm concluding, enough melatonin to keep her sleeping through the night.
Yeah, well, it could be that. It also, progesterone has a calming effect. I mean, there's a lot of things that it can do. So one thing I want to emphasize to anyone who's going to go and try this is that it takes time. Just like when you decide you want to lose weight and you can't lose 100 pounds overnight, but you have to start making the decisions as if you already had lost that weight. It's the same thing. When you start, even with a supplement, if you're going to go after a supplement to help you, you have to know that it's not going to happen overnight. You've got to give it time. And the changes, if you don't keep track of what's happening in your life, like right when you start it to the point, like after taking it for a couple of months or a couple of weeks even, you're not going to know that there's any changes because you're going to feel better and you're going to start doing things that you weren't doing before. Right. And when you start to feel better, you may not attribute it to the change that you made. That's why we recommend you only change one thing at a time, especially when it comes to, a supplement or a medication. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, it's so great that you emphasize that because I also it points to just that sense of commitment to yourself. You were saying earlier, like the integrity you have around your decisions. Like you're making a decision, you're making the most informed decision that you can for the thing you want to achieve, and paying attention to it to make sure that you're paying attention to what's happening.
Yeah, no, that's great. So tell me about the data that you got in terms of like when you started putting this together, how did you do the research, and is this an evidence-based kind of supplement?
So there, as you pointed out, there aren't a lot of placebo-controlled double-blind studies around supplements in and of themselves, whether they're phytochemicals or plant and botanical products. So it ends up being like a quilt of different resources. So looking at, does this particular, like there's chasteberry, there are a couple studies around chasteberry. They're fairly small, looking at cycle regulation. And so that's not necessarily mapped to a perimenopausal woman, but understanding the mechanism around adding chasteberry to regulate the cycle. That to me is reasonable enough to say like, okay, I can rely on this, that's going to help regulate a woman's cycle. And if it's regulating her cycle, it's likely affecting progesterone. So there was that. And so then there was the milk thistle, and then there's the dim we talked about. So it's a matter of, and this is one of the things that I want to fix, I see as the future of women's health, menopause and women's health, is that we have all these research studies, small, medium. Sometimes, it's like, does this herb affect women taking tamoxifen? And you're thinking like, okay, like that's great to know, but can we extrapolate that study to a larger population or this particular cohort of a population? Like we're stuck there. It's kind of crappy. So, doing the best I can. And I'm a fan of mapping traditional plant medicine with current research to say like, okay, we have both. As much as I'm like a modern, like problem-solving analytical nerd, there's part of me that's like a deep hippie witch. And
I love that.
And I am down with the plant medicine. And I don't want us there's like, oh, plants, herbs, supplements, blah, blah, blah. There is deep wisdom for many millennia in cultures around the world that have healed their humans with the plants available. And I would even argue that modern medicine was rooted in, why does this plant work? Let's put it under a microscope. Let's extract what actually worked. And then there we go. And now it's like the source of it is like poo-pooed. So I really want to embrace both. And that's what
that's good.
Pull to the table for Mighty. Like I want to be hip and cool, but also witchy.
Yeah, no, that's really good because, people have been healing other people for, 5,000, 6,000 years. And we've got ancient wisdom from the Amazonian rainforest, and we've got ancient wisdom from Chinese medicine and ancient wisdom from Korea. And so it's not like because we have laboratories now and we come from, Europe and that we're better. And so, it's almost like, I hate to say this, but it's almost like the racism that America was built on, has really just played out throughout like as medicine has grown up, and especially in America. And America thinks they're the best, have the best outcomes and all the things. And, when you start to look at simple things like birth rates, maybe America isn't number one. Right. But yet we spend more money per capita on healthcare.
Yeah, I know.
Because of insurance companies.
We're number one there on that list.
Yeah. That because of insurance companies and the fact that, those guys are getting paid. Think about the bonuses that the insurance company CEOs are getting.
Yeah.
It's and I'm not against profit. I love profit. I think profit is fantastic. I think money is great. I love money. But, there's ethics involved. And when the insurance companies stopped being not for profit, that's when all of our healthcare costs went up. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a crazy world from that perspective. And I think that, to your point of like where we are now in modern science, that it's so provable. It's so easy to say like, it's 7. This is 7. Like it impacts 7 people, or it's the level 7 in your blood, that it's like, okay, like that, it's almost irrefutable, therefore it becomes kind of normative. Like, let's just think about this. Like it's a square. You're like, okay, it's a square because it's 90 degrees in 4 places. Okay. And then you're like, what about this beautiful architecture in a tree? You're like, I'm not so sure. I can't measure it, or, And so I think it's important I always want to kind of pull in both. I love being a modern human being in the modern world, but I'm really drawn to kind of what we've done as humans for even longer.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. And it's funny because I have a friend who was a Chinese medicine practitioner, and she said that there wasn't even a word for menopause in Chinese until recently.
Oh my God, I heard that too. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really telling.
Yeah, it has to do with environmental toxins and food toxins and things like that, for sure.
And also cultural orientation around life. Like menopause is a thing, it's a problem, you're losing your youth and your femininity, we need to fix it. To like, okay, now you're just no longer capable of having babies. Let's just sort you out for your things.
Well, not only that, but where's the wisdom, right? I mean, the crone, the wisdom of the crone and all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're trying to bring that back. I mean, I like to say that I'm 56 years old. I'm going to be 57 in October, and I can do more with this body than I was able to do when I was 18, 19 years old, I mean, I can run for 45 minutes to an hour and a half without stopping if I want to. I mean, I can lift heavier weights. I can ride my bike longer. I can, from a physical standpoint, I can do a lot more. My brain works well. I don't have a lot of aches and pains. I mean, it's really awesome. I love this life that I have now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want today to be better than yesterday. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's all I look for.
Yeah.
So tell me, was there anything else you were hoping to share that we didn't get to?
No, I am really happy to share about perimenopause and for women to understand really like what's happening at early perimenopause and start paying attention to it. That is always my first message when I'm talking about Mighty and menopause. Then thinking about the other thing I would just share as suggestion and or advice for women is there's increasing amounts of resources for menopause. Doctors, coaches, companies, bloggers, like all the things. And that really look to them all. And like I'm also inclined to do is just like kind of pull together and see like where they overlay, like, oh, this makes sense. Okay, they're both saying the same thing. Why are they saying something slightly different? And try and spend some time figuring it out. I know we're all super busy, but it'll empower decisions later, right? To be able to say, oh, right, I heard that here. And they're both saying this about HRT and this is different, or there's not something new that came out, and understanding what's important to you. I think that's really valuable. And that's another level of commitment. That's the other thing, if I could add, and this is just another like PSA.
Sure.
Because I also often, when I start talking about menopause, I give this layout of context. We use the word menopause in different ways. One is the 12-month anniversary or your final menstrual period. So menopause is a day in your life. Then
unless you're in your 40s. Unless you're in your 40s, then it's 24 months.
Right. Oh, really? Okay, got it. I'll remember that. And then there's menopause as like this thing that happens to women in a large chunk, and you're always in menopause, which is like a state of always having been post-puberty, like you're post-menopause. And then there's the menopause transition. So when I talk about menopause, I talk about those years where it's symptomatic, where hormone profile is changing from one to the other. And that's like the messy time. And I always urge women to think about that when they're reading. Are they talking about menopause the day? Are they talking about menopause the transition? Or menopause is kind of this state or phase of the body being post-reproductive years?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that some women have symptoms for the rest of their lives. I mean, I still get hot flashes, and I haven't had a period in years. So it's just something that that's why we're here. It's a phase we all get to go through if we live long enough.
Yeah. And
I mean, we're lucky. It may suck for a little while, but we can deal with it. And especially if we find something that works that can help us. So if you want to get this supplement, you can go to menopausemovement.com/mighty. And we can hook that up. We'll also hook that up in the show notes, and you can try it out and, let us know what you think.
Absolutely. And also try out the symptom tracker.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement today, Jeanne.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you. This has been great.
I appreciate it too. It's been wonderful.